I don't have a body. I don't have anything to tell me what happened to my son. Supposedly, alligators ate him.
After 31-year-old Jerry Michael Williams failed to return from a duck hunting trip to Lake Seminole, Florida in December 16, 2000, his family knew something was wrong. Worried about his safety, they set out to search for him, but it was as if he'd vanished without a trace. After several months of searching, Mike was declared legally dead. However, the story of his disappearance did not end there. Over the next 18 years, investigators revisited the case and developed various theories, but found nothing that added up. It wasn't until an unrelated incident uncovered a web of deceit and opened up a closet full of skeletons. But what really happened to Mike? Did he disappear voluntarily or meet a tragic end? Hello and welcome back to M7 Crime Storytime, where we cover solved, unsolved, and twisted cases from around the world. Today we dive into another disturbing case with an insane twist, the case of Michael and Denise Williams. But before we go any further, please take the time to show your support by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and clicking on that notification bell to receive the latest videos straight to your inbox. Without further delay, let's dive into another crime mystery. We return once again to the Sunshine State of Florida and the city of Tallahassee. With a population of just over 196,000 residents, Tallahassee is the 8th largest city in the state of Florida. It's known as a good place to live for those wanting to raise a family, with its cost of living ranking at 4% lower than the national average in the United States. Its beautiful natural environment, historic spaces, and bustling urban areas make it a cultural melting pot and offers everyone their own unique experience. However, on the downside, Tallahassee has one of the highest crime rates in the state, with it being safer than only 10% of other cities in Florida. In the year 2000, Michael and Denise Williams called Tallahassee, Florida, home. First, though, let's return to Mike's humble beginnings. Jerry Michael Williams was born on October 16, 1969, in Bradfordville, north of Tallahassee. He was popularly known as Mike. His father was a Greyhound bus driver, and his mother Cheryl operated a children's daycare from their mobile home. He had an older brother named Nick. People often referred to Mike as being humble, generous, and dependable. His parents decided against building a new house and used the money to provide both Mike and Nick with a quality education. Mike and Nick started working part-time at local supermarkets from their early teens to help their parents pay for their education. They both attended the North Florida Christian High School. Mike excelled in both academics and sport. He played football and was the student council president. Mike also developed an interest in duck hunting at the age of 15, a hobby he shared with his father. While at school, he met Denise Merrill, a cheerleader and fellow student council member. Through Denise, he became close friends with Brian Winchester and his girlfriend, Kathy Thomas. Both couples remained close friends even after graduating high school in 1988. Mike went on to study political science and urban planning at Florida State University. Before graduating, he was hired by the Ketchum Appraisal Group as a property appraiser. The company owner called Mike the hardest working man he'd ever met. On December 16, 1994, he married Denise. The same year, Brian also married Kathy. Both couples remained close friends. Mike and Denise eventually moved into an upscale but small suburb on the east side of Tallahassee. On May 8, 1999, Mike and Denise welcomed a baby girl named Ansley into the world. Mike was as devoted to his family as he was to his job.
Just totally overwhelmed. She was due Tuesday, and she would have made me wait a whole nother year for Mother's Day, so she came yesterday so I could enjoy this day today with her.
It was unbelievable. I have a whole new respect for my wife and women in general and what they go through to bring a new child, new life into the world.
After his father passed away suddenly in the year 2000, Mike saw the need to ensure his family was provided for financially. He took out a life insurance policy valued at $1 million with his friend Brian. Mike was looking forward to expanding his family with Denise and celebrating their 6th wedding anniversary on December 16, 2000. They'd also planned a family cruise to Hawaii in a few months. Little did Mike or anyone else know what was about to unfold. As dawn broke on the Saturday morning of December 16, 2000, Mike woke up early to prepare himself for a relaxing day of duck hunting. He was looking forward to returning home later to celebrate his 6th wedding anniversary with his wife Denise and daughter Ansley in the city of Apalachicola, just an hour and a half away from Tallahassee. He attached his boat to his 1994 Ford Bronco truck, packed his gear and some food, and headed towards Lake Seminole, located on the border of Florida and Georgia. By midday, however, Mike had not returned home. Denise tried calling his phone several times, but each call went to voicemail. It was unusual behavior for Mike, as he was always available to take a call from his wife in case of an emergency. Denise was also concerned because she and Mike had made plans to spend their anniversary together. She called her father and told him that Mike had not returned from duck hunting. Denise then called Brian Winchester, Mike's best friend. Denise asked him if he could help find Mike, who she believed was missing. Brian and his father Marcus decided to drive down to the lake and search for Mike in the areas he frequented. After a long search of Mike's favorite hunting spots, they found his Ford truck parked near a remote boat launch at a cove on the Florida side of Lake Seminole. There was no sign of Mike or his boat. Brian decided it was time to call the authorities. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission handled the search as it was reported as a missing hunter case. Their focus was a search and rescue operation. The search focused on the 10 acres of the lake surrounding the cove where Mike's truck was found. Officers from the FFWCC used air and land support in their search. A team of divers carefully navigated the area due to the alligators living in the lake. It was a few hours later a pilot discovered Mike's boat in the water. It had drifted just 225 feet away from the boat ramp. Upon searching the boat, they found Mike's shotgun still in its case. But there was no sign of Mike. Divers, too, had no luck in finding any trace of Mike in the search area. Deputies from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office also joined the search as additional manpower was needed. From what investigators discovered at the scene, there were no signs that suggested foul play. Unfortunately, that night, a storm rolled in, bringing with it a cold front that delayed the search for Mike. At the time, investigators believed that Mike had been the victim of a boating accident. They theorized that Mike's boat could possibly have hit one of the many protruding tree stumps in the lake, causing him to fall over and drown. Having found none of his hunting gear on the boat, they concluded that he was wearing his hunting gear at the time of the accident. It was a strong possibility his gear may have filled with water and dragged him to the bottom of the lake. Furthermore, investigators determined that Mike may have been attacked and dismembered by the alligators that populated the lake. Investigators explained this theory to Mike's family, but his mother Cheryl refused to believe it.
I don't have a body. I don't have anything to tell me what happened to my son. Supposedly, alligators ate him.
As the search resumed, Cheryl herself hired a private search team to help locate Mike. If Mike had drowned and then been attacked by alligators, investigators were sure his body would eventually float to the surface of the lake. Days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to months. By February 2001, the search had come to a standstill. There was no sign of Mike. The private search team now also agreed with the theory that Mike may have been eaten by alligators. The only possible explanation for a lack of a body was that the alligators could have stored the remains in a location that search teams couldn't locate. A day after the search was called off, Denise held a memorial service for Mike. To everyone, it had seemed that Denise had come to terms with losing Mike, but Cheryl refused to keep quiet. She continued to try to reignite search efforts to find Mike, but the investigators firmly believed that Mike had met a tragic end on Lake Seminole. In June 2001, a curious discovery was made by an angler fishing in Lake Seminole. While out on the lake, he discovered a pair of waders floating in the water. He contacted the FFWCC, and a renewed search began. It was the first big break since Mike had gone missing 6 months earlier. Divers who were called to help in the search found a lightweight hunting jacket at the bottom of the lake. After bringing it to the surface, they discovered a fully functioning flashlight and a hunting license belonging to Mike Williams. The find, however, raised more questions. There were no visible teeth marks on the hunting jacket or the waders to suggest an attack by alligators. The condition of the jacket, flashlight, and hunting license were not consistent with being in the water for an extended period of time. The jacket was tested for DNA that would have been left behind had Mike been using the gear, but all tests came back negative. But the discovery was not the only surprising news Cheryl and her son Nick were about to receive. A week after Mike's hunting jacket was found in the lake, a Leon County judge granted Mike's widow Denise a petition to have him declared legally dead. A process that normally took 5 years in the state of California was granted in a matter of 6 months. The decision allowed Denise to begin proceedings to access Mike's life insurance. She was able to cash out 3 life policies with an accumulated value of $1.5 million. Denise, it seemed, had moved on and refused to search for Mike or seek any further assistance. The entire situation seemed suspicious to Cheryl, who believed there was something more to the case. She'd not been made aware that Denise had petitioned for Mike to be declared legally dead. She vowed not to give up her fight for justice. After trying and failing to have the investigation into Mike's disappearance reopened, his mother Cheryl took the matter into her own hands again. She strongly believed that Mike had not drowned in the lake. As far as she knew, Mike had been highly experienced in duck hunting and took all the precautions he needed before setting out on a trip. Cheryl turned to taking out advertisements in the local newspapers, granting local reporters interviews, and going as far as to put up billboards seeking answers about Mike. Having lost her husband and now her son, it had been too hard for her to process that Mike simply vanished. She'd kept notes on Mike's investigation and even made her own investigation into the alligator theory. This, however, created tension between her and Denise. Following Mike's death, Denise had remained on good terms with Cheryl. But as time passed and Cheryl remained relentless in her search for Mike, Denise grew angry. She issued Cheryl and Mike's brother Nick with an ultimatum to stop the investigation or they would never see Ansley again. According to reports, an article in the Tallahassee Democrat led to a confrontation between Denise, Cheryl, and Nick in August 2001. Denise had called Cheryl and Nick over to the home she once shared with Mike. The talk turned into a heated confrontation between Denise and Cheryl, with Denise accusing her mother-in-law of being stubborn. Denise added that she was tired of seeing articles about Mike and his disappearance in the paper and on billboards in the city. She just wanted to have a chance to get on with her life. Cheryl faced the possibility of losing contact with her granddaughter Ansley, but she could not give up on her son.
After Mike disappeared, she threatened me. She said, if you do anything to get a criminal investigation, you're going to lose access to Ansley, my granddaughter. I'd already lost my husband. I lost Michael, and now she's telling me I'm going to lose Ansley.
Mike's case was reopened in 2004 after Cheryl lobbied for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to take a fresh look at the evidence they initially collected. Over the course of 4 years, Cheryl remained active in the investigation and took her evidence to the department. One of the theories she helped dispel was that of the alligators devouring Mike's remains. Through independent research and seeking out an expert, Cheryl was able to learn that alligators do not feed during the cold winter months. This evidence was brought to the department officials who conducted their own investigation into alligator feeding habits. It was proven correct, and the initial belief that Mike was eaten by alligators was debunked by several experts. Some went as far as to explain that it would be a stretch to imagine a fully grown adult male being completely devoured by alligators. Other officers who had been part of the initial investigation came forward with some of the inconsistencies they discovered during the case. The first issue began with the discovery of Mike's truck and boat. Everyone who knew Mike understood that he was a stickler when it came to safety. Mike knew the area well enough to understand the dangers of parking his truck and launching his fishing boat in an isolated and underdeveloped area. He was not the type of person to take a risk like that. He often used the concrete boat launches when fishing. Another peculiarity was with the boat itself. For one, the engine had been switched off and the gas tank was still full. If Mike fell off the boat while hunting, the engine would still have been switched on but dead, and the gas tank completely empty. The final puzzling factor was the discovery of the waders and hunting jacket. There had been no signs of damage by wildlife, nor was there any significant water damage related to being submerged in fresh water for an extended period. There were only two possible theories investigators could come up with. Either Mike had left on his own, or foul play was involved in his disappearance. Questions were being raised, and Mike's case had come into the spotlight once again. Although Cheryl finally received the breakthrough she'd been fighting for, she was about to be dealt another blow. In January 2005, things reached a tipping point between Denise and Cheryl. Following the reopening of the case, Denise denied Cheryl and Nick any access to Ansley. But investigators' suspicions were raised even further after the marriage of Denise Williams to Brian Winchester on December 3, 2005. Investigators learned that 2 years after Mike's disappearance, Brian filed for divorce from his wife Kathy and moved in with Denise. They interviewed Kathy, who told them that she suspected Brian was having an affair with Denise since 1997. Furthermore, Brian was the person who drew up Mike's insurance policy just 6 months before his disappearance. The same policies that Denise cashed mere days after her petition to have Mike declared legally dead was allowed. Brian also seemed to integrate himself into the investigation at rather crucial moments. He was the person to find Mike's truck, he agreed with the alligator theory, and he helped identify the items found in the lake 6 months after Mike disappeared. Investigators also learned of the confrontations between Denise and Cheryl. It seemed odd to them that, as Mike's wife, she did not want anything more to do with the investigation, and also tried to deter Cheryl from pursuing the case. This prompted investigators to bring both Brian and Denise in for questioning in 2005. When questioned about the day of Mike's disappearance, Brian told investigators he'd planned to go hunting with his father-in-law on the morning of December 16, 2000. However, he overslept after attending a concert with his ex-wife Kathy the night before. His story seemed to fit with the background investigation into his movements on the day of Mike's disappearance. During her questioning, Denise described her day in a matter-of-fact style. She said that she woke up after Mike left to go hunting. She then tended to Ansley and went about her daily routine. Later, she called to check on Mike, and after several unanswered calls, decided to contact her father and Brian to help look for Mike. Her answers were cool and without emotion, according to investigators. But the interviews did not bring investigators any closer to discovering what happened to Mike. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement announced that Mike's disappearance was not an accident, and they believed that foul play was involved. However, without enough evidence, they were unable to issue any search warrants or pursue charges in the case. This was impacted by the fact that the initial investigation had not focused on the homicide angle at all. Due to this, all possible evidence from the crime scene, Mike's boat, and truck had deteriorated. They actively stopped pursuing the case, but investigators remained hopeful that sometime in the future, a spilled secret could lead to the truth behind Mike's disappearance. Cheryl continued to put pressure on the FDLE to look into Mike's case. When her attempts failed, she turned to writing a letter every single day for 9 years to the office of the governor of Florida. After sending nearly 2,600 letters to the office without reply, she called the office of Governor Rick Scott personally to ask why he didn't answer any of her letters. Cheryl was told that all of her letters had been forwarded to the FDLE for further investigation. Disappointed but not deterred, Cheryl continued to seek justice. On her own, she held a demonstration in Tallahassee in 2011 to honor Mike and seek answers in his case. On the afternoon of August 5, 2016, the course of the investigation finally took a turn for the better. In a surprising twist of events, Denise walked into the Leon County Sheriff's Office to file a charge of kidnapping and request a protection order against her ex-husband, Brian Winchester. This was, however, part of the investigative team's plan over the last few years. Unbeknownst to Denise or Brian, investigators had been watching them closely over the years. They were aware that the couple separated in 2012 after Brian proved to be unfaithful in the marriage. Added to that was the tension created by the investigation into Mike's case as a possible homicide and their constant fighting. Investigators were aware that both Brian and Denise had started to grow paranoid since their previous interview with the couple. Those monitoring the couple noticed that Denise maintained her cool exterior and didn't seem to fold under pressure. Brian, however, had started to unravel under the weight of the stress. According to a few friends of Brian, he'd become a ghost of his former self. He was desperate to hold on to his marriage with Denise. Brian turned to therapy for treatment of his addictions. Denise, however, went ahead and filed for divorce from Brian in 2015. This had been the tipping point. According to reports, investigators saw an opportunity to strike while the iron was hot. The investigators knew they needed to provoke a reaction from either Denise or Brian in order to get answers about what happened to Mike. They saw their opportunity on the evening of August 4, 2016. Investigators paid Brian a visit knowing that he was the weak link. They explained to him that Denise planned to tell them the truth about Mike's disappearance once her divorce with him was made official. With no spousal privilege binding them, she could testify and place the blame of Mike's disappearance squarely on his shoulders. The investigators' ploy paid off, and they finally had Denise where they wanted her, in the interrogation room. Over the course of 3 hours, Denise explained her side of the story and how Brian had attempted to kidnap her on the morning of August 5, 2016, the day after the investigators had approached Brian. On that morning, Denise was on her way to work at Florida State University when she noticed a man climbing over the back seat of her SUV. She then noticed that it was Brian. She explained to officers that she believed Brian may have been sleeping in her car, lying in wait for her. She believed that he'd resorted to this after she refused to answer any of his numerous phone calls the night before. Denise went on to explain that Brian got into the seat behind her and held a handgun to her ribs. Brian then demanded she drive to an isolated area, but she didn't comply. Instead, she intentionally made a wrong turn that led to a parking lot of a local drugstore. Denise explained she was in tears at the time due to the shock of the situation, but Brian was furious and screamed at her to stop crying. She regained her composure and calmly asked him if he was planning on killing the both of them that day. Brian responded by saying he intended to take his own life because he had nothing more to live for after their divorce became final. In order to calm him down, she tried to soothe him and listen to his side of the story. Thereafter, she agreed not to report the incident to police and promised to meet with him and his father Marcus for a meeting that afternoon at Marcus's office. Once he calmed down, Denise drove him to his own truck. As he got ready to leave the car, he pulled out a backpack and began packing what appeared to be a sheet, a plastic cover, a metal tool, and a bottle of bleach. He also packed a gun into his bag. Denise realized that it was Brian's kill kit, and if things had gone any other way, she would not have been here at the sheriff's office reporting the incident. Her first instinct after Brian drove off was to get a protection order for herself and Ansley. Officers were able to gain Denise's trust by agreeing with her assessment of Brian's behavior and gradual loss of control. Sheriff's deputies contacted FDLE Special Agent Mike Devaney and Tallahassee police officer David McCrane, both of whom worked on Mike's case. McCrane also happened to be Denise's brother-in-law, as he was her sister Deborah's husband. They gained her confidence by talking about Brian's kidnapping attempt before jumping straight into the real reason they were there, to get answers about Mike's disappearance. McCrane presented Denise with what they knew about Brian's behavior before throwing out the idea that if Brian could attempt killing her, it was possible he also killed Mike.
I'm wondering if she was taking you to the same place today that he buried Mike, because he's done it before. You have to wrap your mind around it, Denise. That is what he has done, and he's willing to do it again. He is going to kill you. Think about it. He slept in your car and waited for you. But I don't think he slept. I think he knew what time he was watching you.
That's just not to be.
He watched Mike. I watched Mike stay in that office every night till 11 o'clock at night. All the time. Mike was so predictable. Every now and then I'd talk to him, but then I wouldn't get to talk to him. So predictable.
Yeah.
He waited for him that day. He was missing for 5 or 6 hours, Brian, the day of?
I don't know.
Well, a lot of people know.
Missing?
Yeah.
Denise stubbornly refused to believe Brian was capable of such a horrific crime. McCrane reminded Denise of an incident with Brian and an ex-boyfriend in Atlanta from 2003, but Denise still refused to believe that Brian could have been a killer. Denise denied having any knowledge of Mike's disappearance. It was then the turn of Officer Devaney. He cut through her explanation of the kidnapping that occurred earlier that day and went straight to the point of Mike's disappearance. Denise remained steadfast and denied any knowledge of Mike's whereabouts. When he told her they had video evidence linking her to Mike's disappearance and a subsequent cover-up, she told him that she was starting to feel uncomfortable, and the interview with Devaney was concluded.
If I say we're totally aware of all the videos, you probably know what I'm talking about.
If you say what?
The videos?
I would have to see them.
Well, that's not going to happen. But
Okay.
you're clueless when I say videos.
I don't, yeah.
You, Kathy and Brian?
I would have to see them.
Yeah. You have no idea what I'm talking about. Don't say you've got to see them.
No, I'm just starting to feel very uncomfortable.
Okay.
Brian was eventually found and arrested on charges of attempted kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed burglary. At Brian's arraignment, Denise read a statement that begged for the judge to deny him bond for both her and her daughter's safety. She told the judge that she couldn't sleep because all she could feel was the gun pushing into her ribs and hearing Brian's threatening to end his life. Brian was held without bond. On December 19, 2017, Brian's sentencing hearing was held. He pleaded no contest to all charges leveled against him. Prosecutors asked that Brian receive a 45-year sentence because he was capable of repeating the crime for which he'd been charged. Denise again read a statement at Brian's hearing and pleaded with the judge to consider giving him a life sentence. She believed he was capable of finishing what he started if he was released early.
He will finish what he has started. I'm asking you to sentence him to life in prison for the crimes he has committed. It comes down to my life or his, and I'm asking you, please, to choose mine. Thank you.
Brian's defense argued that he should receive the 10-year minimum sentence, as on the day of the kidnapping, he'd suffered through great emotional stress. Upon learning of his mother's cancer diagnosis, the impending divorce from Denise, and the loss of custody of his son to his ex-wife Kathy, he lost control. Brian, too, read a statement in which he stated that he didn't intend to harm Denise, but knew that the incident hurt her deeply. He expressed his remorse openly.
Did I have any intentions of harming Denise? Nor would I. Nonetheless, I do know that she was hurt by my actions, and again, I am truly sorry.
Upon hearing all sides, the judge sentenced Brian to 20 years in prison at the Wakula Correctional Facility near Tallahassee, and another 15 years of probation. Mike's family, especially his mother Cheryl and brother Nick, were devastated with the outcome. Not once had Mike been mentioned during the case, nor was Brian's involvement highlighted in his disappearance. Mike's family and friends were left defeated by the sentencing. But the story of Mike was not about to be forgotten. In an unexpected twist, Special Agent Mark Perez of the FDLE made a startling announcement a day after Brian's sentencing. On December 20th, 2017, the investigators announced that Mike's remains had been found. This was confirmed through DNA testing later that week. His remains were discovered at the dead end of Gardner Road in Leon County, just 5 miles from where he grew up. Investigators did not reveal the manner in which Mike had met his tragic end, but confirmed that the case was being investigated as a homicide. Investigators continued to monitor Denise and brought Kathy Thomas, Brian's ex-wife, on board as an informant. Denise made contact with Kathy just a week after Brian's sentencing. Kathy played along as their conversations were being taped. Denise had wanted Kathy to pass along a message to Marcus, Brian's father. The message was to let Brian know she was not going to talk. Kathy tried several times to get Denise to talk, going as far as to lie about being called to testify about Brian's affair with Denise. She then dropped a bombshell. Kathy told Denise she knew about the plan that she and Brian hatched to have Mike murdered. Kathy explained that Brian lost his temper once and told her everything about the murder. Investigators analyzed the call and came to the conclusion that at no point did Denise deny having any part in Mike's disappearance. All Denise seemed concerned about was how much Brian had told Kathy. For investigators, the taped conversations were just the extra evidence they needed to put together an arrest warrant for Denise. They had already come to a plea agreement in October 2017 with Brian after his arrest for the attempted kidnapping of Denise. Brian did not hold back and agreed to turn witness in the case against Denise. He revealed to investigators the entire affair and detailed his and Denise's plan to have Mike murdered so that they could be together. Brian provided a curious detail of how they came up with a hunting trip as an alibi for the murder. He explained to investigators that on a previous hunting trip, Mike almost died after slipping into quicksand. Had Brian not been there, it was possible Mike would have perished. He explained to investigators how Denise thought that the hunting trip idea was a perfect cover-up. She believed that if God willed it, Mike would survive the planned accident. If not, then it was his destiny. Denise also didn't want to fight for custody over Ansley and was in a hurry to have Mike's life ended because she didn't want her daughter growing up with memories of Mike. On May 8, 2018, while leaving work to go home and celebrate her daughter Ansley's 19th birthday, Denise was arrested. She was charged for first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory after the fact. She was detained at the Leon County Detention Center, awaiting a bond hearing. In June 2018, she was denied bail and remained in the detention center until her trial began in December 2018. Denise's defense lawyer, Ethan Way, continued to appeal the charges and maintained Denise's not guilty plea. On December 11, 2018, Denise's trial began. Opening statements were heard on that day, and the prosecution argued that Denise preferred to be known as a widow rather than a divorcee. The next person to testify in the case was Brian Winchester. He told the court of their affair and how the plan to have Mike killed and make it look like an accident came about.
And another option was that the four of us would go out on a boat out into the Gulf, and basically that Kathy and Mike would be pushed overboard, and that Denise and I would find a buoy way offshore that we could hold on to and either let the boat sink or let the boat take off on its own or whatever and make it look like we had an accident on the water, and that Denise and I had survived the accident.
Throughout the trial, Denise remained emotionless, listening as witness after witness came forward exposing what they knew about her involvement in Mike's disappearance. During a cross-examination, Brian admitted that he was a liar and a murderer, but explained that his attorneys advised him to tell the truth and receive a deal for giving testimony of Denise's involvement in Mike's disappearance and murder. In the end, her defense team argued that there was no evidence tying Denise to Mike's disappearance, nor was there a confession from Denise that she played a role in Mike's murder. They went after Brian instead and pointed out the deal he made and the motivation he had to murder Mike. On December 14, 2018, the jury found Denise guilty on all charges after deliberating for 8 hours. In February 2019, Denise was sentenced to life imprisonment at the Florida Women's Reception Center. The only person to speak at the sentencing, apart from the lawyers, was Cheryl Williams, who told the court that justice had finally been served.
Judge Hankinson, there is no amount of prison time that will bring Mike back to me. I don't know if I will ever have Ansley in my life again because of the damage her mother has done. I am asking you to lock Denise Merrill Williams Winchester up for the rest of her life with no chance of parole. She has already lived 18 years longer than my son.
5 months later, in July 2019, Ansley was awarded all the assets of her late father's estate and the insurance money received by Denise. She was awarded this with a caveat that she could in no way use the money to help pay for her mother's legal fees, or else she would face a hefty penalty. In January 2020, Denise appealed her life sentence conviction before the Florida First District Court of Appeals. Her lawyers argued there was no evidence linking her to the actual crime. In November 2020, her murder conviction was overturned, but the conspiracy charge remained in place. Denise Williams' release date is set for April 25, 2047. She will be 78 years old before she sees the outside world again. Brian was moved to the Madison Correctional Institute in Florida to serve out the remainder of his sentence. His current release date is set for July 30, 2036, when he'll be 67 years old. Mike and Denise's daughter, Ansley, has maintained her mother's innocent and placed the blame on Brian Winchester. She refused to speak with any media outlets regarding the outcome of the case and her personal life. According to reports, Cheryl and Nick Williams have also had no luck in making contact with Ansley. Cheryl maintains there is so much she wants to tell Ansley, but most of all, she wanted her to know that her father Mike loved her dearly. For Cheryl, it's been hard knowing not only did she lose her son, she also lost her granddaughter. The case of Mike Williams is as sad as it is twisted. Not only did a good man lose his life, but for years, those responsible continued to benefit from measures he took to ensure his family's future. But today's case proves that karma works in mysterious ways, and the bad you do always comes back to find you. So, what are your thoughts on our case today? Do you believe that Brian only dragged Denise into the conspiracy out of revenge? Or is Denise equally guilty for Mike's murder, even if she didn't pull the trigger? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you have any cases you'd like us to cover, please mention that too in the comments as well. Also, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more mysterious crime content. Until next time, stay safe.